Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo. Today, we are going to talk about creating new spaces through vulnerability. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Jenn T, the founder of Publish Your Purpose, because in the work that I do, I realize how much people hold back from telling their story. And this impacts them not only from career development perspective, but from a leadership perspective and from the perspective of creating workplaces that bring humanity more to the forefront. I think a big reason why we are where we are with workplace culture is because we have been taught to stuff our truth and to stuff who we are for the sake of fitting in to places and spaces. So without any further ado, let's jump in. I'm just thrilled to have you here. Thanks for being a guest.
Thanks for having me. I loved our kind of our preamble of our conversation of who knows what we'll actually get into today, but I'm just excited because it's always good to spend time with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, me too. I'm super excited about this topic. But before I go on a whole soapbox about why, I just want I want our audience here to learn more about you. Like, tell us your story about you and also the work that you do, and just kind of give folks a bit of a grounding.
Yeah, so I will try to give the abridged version of the story because there's so many different ways that I can kind of take the story, and we can get into other things later as well. But I am based here in Connecticut, so we're neighbors in the Northeast. And I've been helping authors work on their books since about 2013. So it's been over 10 years, which is kind of wild. And it really started because I had written my first book in 2012, published it in 2013, wrote another one, and I had a whole bunch of books that came out really fast from 2013, 14, and 15. And I had a lot of people just in my network wondering how I knew how to do it, what was my process. And I didn't really have any formalized process. I just always knew that I wanted to write a book. What the book would be about, that was a big question mark. I didn't really have I didn't really know until I had clients asking me to write one. And then in 2015, I started putting people in group settings and kind of teaching them how to do it. And then that very quickly turned into people being like, yeah, I know that you're teaching me, but I'd rather you do it for me instead. And then that's when Publish Your Purpose started in 2016. So it's been, I guess now 11 years that I've been somehow in these spaces, even though I had a consulting business that I didn't close until 2017. So I was running kind of parallel tracks for quite some time. And now I'm just kind of living in a very happy place because I'm curious to a fault, and I love learning new things. And so the curiosity plus the love of learning is just a beautiful match for working with people who are writing books on topics that I know nothing about. So every day the process is the same, but everything's just a little bit different because every author's different, every topic's different. And I feel like I'm always just feeling really good about what I do in the world.
Oh, and that beautiful. Gosh, I mean, like I want that for everybody, you know? I mean, it's kind of what I do, why I do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me more about, because I know part of your business, right, is driven by this passion of people sharing their story. So tell me about like what that passion is all about. Because it's not just about like, the process and like you have such a deeper reason for being. And so I'd love to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. And so the company's called Publish Your Purpose because it is bigger than just book publishing, right? There's so many different companies and different service providers and places that an author who's aspiring to write a book can go and just kind of get it done, kind of move along in the process and be happy. But for me, it is a bigger purpose because I find that so many people have stories to share that either are not currently reflected in what's available, or they feel like they're not good enough to be the one that shares the story, or they're not important enough, or there's that kind of underlaying of imposter syndrome that I think everyone experiences. I don't think I've worked with somebody yet that doesn't experience it, myself included. And so if I kind of look at that framing to just help people see that their story does matter and that it's worth telling, even if you're like 100 other people have written a book like this. That doesn't matter because it's still not your book and from your lived experience. And if I go kind of back in time to the first book I wrote, which was I have 4 books that are around LGBTQ marketing and communication. So I had a consulting company that focused in financial services in that space. And when I was writing my first book, it was very much woven with my own personal stories of just really having crappy workplace experiences is really what it came down to, where I had just a lot of discrimination issues for being a queer person. And this goes back 20 years at this point. And I found that when I was writing those stories, whether I started on a podcast or whether it was on a blog or wherever it ended up being in the book eventually, is that the stories are what resonated the most with people. It wasn't me saying, "Hey, you as a financial advisor should know how to communicate with your customer. Here's some tips." It was, "Here's a situation I had with a service provider and how it went really sideways and how there might be something to benefit and learn from here." And so I really started to notice that very early on. And I feel like it seems like it makes perfect, like it seems like common sense, right? When we're talking about books and storytelling should be the focus of the book. But I feel like a lot of times it's not, like, because we're so focused on like being an expert in what we know that we kind of like want to surface level skim past our story because we don't expose ourselves too much because then people know the real us and that's too confronting.
Oh my God. Can we just mic drop on that shit right there? I'm going to need every listener to go back and listen to that because it is about the story. It is about you in the story and not omitting you. Your story in it is what makes it impactful. It's what makes it powerful. Working with folks in transformation, right? And getting from where they are to where they want to be, whether they're continuing a corporate journey, whether they're starting an entrepreneurial path. They really shy away from what's my story, what's my take, actually, and what's my personality. Even in the resume writing, I'm always like, we have to infuse you into the narrative of the resume because for a number of reasons, but it brings you to light. You are the differentiator in your experience. Um, so I'm curious, given that, right? Like, what have you found to be helpful in the light bulb moment of the folks that you talk to say, oh shit, I got to write my story or I got to tell my part of the story as I'm sharing my expertise? Like, I'm like looking for the magic bullet here. I mean, like what helps people to really, really see that this is important?
That is such a good question. And I really wish I had a magic bullet because I think I could fast track that transformation for people a lot quicker because it's almost like professionalism, however we want to define that, meets the creative aspect of us or just our personal identities. There's not a lot of room for it in business settings, is what I have found. And I don't know if it's just based on age for myself personally, where I don't really care as much anymore as maybe I once did, or if maybe we're entering a society that just has lessened I don't want to say barriers to entry, but let me share kind of an example where my mind is going. If I go back in time to, I don't know what year, that probably 2005, 6, 7, somewhere almost 20 years ago. I remember how I would show up to networking events. I showed up to networking events how I thought people wanted to see me showing up to networking events, where I was wearing suits. I can't even tell you the last time I put on something even remotely close to a suit. It's been a long time. But like that's what I felt like was required of me because I was a young professional at the time. I was probably 25 maybe. So that's what everybody around was saying, like, this is how you have to do it. In an environment where you have to show up a certain way, you're also going to hold back on the stories that you tell. And you're going to hold back on the information, the details that you provide about yourself, because you're like, I'm in a professional setting. People have this expectation of me. I have to be on professional to professional level. There's no room for personal conversation and personalness. And if I go back to just in mid-March when I went to a conference in Vancouver, I brought a blazer. Did I wear it? No. But I showed up as my authentic me. And I went deep and personal in every conversation I was having. While yes, and I think that's the benefit of being someone who does work with authors and publishes books and works with stories, is that I feel like there's like a little bit of permission granted where I'm talking to somebody and maybe we're meeting in a professional setting like a conference, but we can immediately go to the depth of a story because there's a comfort level, perhaps, where someone's like, oh, this person publishes books, they help authors. Like I can really just kind of expose myself and share. But I found in the same conference I was just at, I was watching people interacting, like, because there would be, lunch tables and it was like themed topics around the lunch table. And I could see how much people are holding back their stories. And so I happened to be sitting at a table that was about sustainable travel and tourism. I don't, that is not my industry at all, the travel and tourism side. But I was like, oh, I'm just going to go chat with these people. And I had the entire table captivated by a story that I was sharing around being in a homophobic work environment, because they were talking about how to, like, somehow LGBTQ things came up in conversation, which was not the theme of the conference either. And it's because I was the only one that was vulnerably sharing sitting at that table of 10 people. And it's like, there's a place for vulnerability in professional settings, but somehow we've lost our way in being able to do that. And I'm just watching this kind of evolution happen. And I'm wondering, like, is it just me? Or are we just kind of entering a new place where people are feeling a little more free to share more about themselves?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out where to start with what you shared, because I absolutely agree with the evolution, right? And I always say we're flying the plane and we're building at the same time, right? So I feel like we have a lot of people that don't like the cultures and the systems and the places that we show up to work, and at the same time we're trying to change it. And I think there's this, like, ebb and flow of, like, how much can I just be me, right? And be successful and also play by the rules and all these things, right? It's a lot to hold and it's a lot to figure out what's possible here. And I think that my belief is that the reason why we're in this situation with workplace culture is because we're not showing up, giving ourselves permission to be all of who we are and to be vulnerable and to just be honest, because we're all just stuffing shit, and all people really want is connection at work. That's all. You know what I mean? Like, we just want to feel like these 8 hours a day that I'm spending, is I'm feeling connected. And I think that, I don't know, in the work that I do, so much of it is helping people to see what it actually looks like to bring all of you to actually show up fully and to not hold back. Because at the end of the day, when we hold back and we're not really showing up as who we are, we don't know if these are spaces that are actually for us. And then the more that we show up fully, then we can more easily decide, is this actually a long-term place for me? Or is this a place that actually doesn't work when I'm showing up as me? And that is scary to find out. It's scary to say, oh crap, I've been here for 10 years or I've been here for 15 years and I'm not encouraged to be me here. And so it's time to go. And that's a scary revelation, but also it'll transform your life, right?
Yeah, because now you're living in more alignment. Because I think so often, like, if we look at kind of just the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging space, so often the conversation is around race and gender and cultures. But it's even deeper than that. It's just being able to authentically show up as yourself with whatever interests that you have. And if everyone in the office are a bunch of catty bitches, and that's not, you're not gonna, go to that level, you're vibrating at a higher level, there's going to be a clash regardless of what other kind of factors might be at play, because you're going to be like, wow, I don't want to engage in this office drama and gossip, but that just might be the culture. And you're kind of like, you either have to sink to their level or you have to say, this isn't the place for me. And I don't know that we're in a place I don't know that people feel empowered to be able to have that hard conversation, to be like, what is happening here? And I think age probably does have a big factor in this, because I feel like if you're, fresh out of high school or college and your working environments, you might, I don't know if this is true anymore, you might just kind of put your head down and be like, all right, I'm just going to kind of get some experience here. Whereas someone who's older and kind of jumping from one profession or one job to another, maybe they're not going to tolerate it anymore. I don't really know, but I feel like we have to just be more open and transparent about who we are and what our interests are and, who's in our life. And I remember back in literally 20 years ago, having an office job where I had to hide who my partner was because it was such a homophobic work environment that there was absolutely no room whatsoever for me to share any details about her. None. None. I had one coworker that I finally had mentioned it to, which then turned into two out of like 100 people because it was such a toxic, catty work environment that I'm like, I am not like, why am I going to give you anything to then just use against me at a later date? And it's like, that really should have been kind of like the superpower, right? Like it's almost like that should have been the thing that like makes you different and makes you have different connections with different people, and you can help kind of expose people to new things. You can be exposed to new things. But I feel like our workplaces are so toxic in so many ways, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I love what you shared because I was just actually at doing a workshop with Girls Inc. and the topic is around superpowers, and that our superpowers often come from the places that we shame or we hide or we don't know how to embrace, because mostly because societal messages or messages from folks close to us are telling us these are not good things, but they're actually what makes us different and unique and valuable. And going back to your comment around, the younger population versus the older population, I actually think yes, and that can also be reversed, because the further you are in your career, the more fear there is around saying,
Losing
"Oh,
it.
yeah, like, oh gosh, I have to go somewhere else, or I gotta leave this thing, or I gotta figure something out." And I think some of the young folks actually are less inhibited to just
Put up with it.
yeah, they're just like, "What? This is not why I'm here on this earth right now, to be treated like crap." Like, so I think all the fear above are happening at the same
Yeah.
time. It's just like who and where and whatever. But I think the bigger groundswell is we have to put humanity back into the world, and coming back full circle to why we're having this conversation. Putting humanity back in means sharing our stories, humanizing our experience, and honoring that we're not just cogs here, that we add value because of who we are and not because we put away who we are when we step in the door to do our work.
Yeah. And I think that's where our interests come in too, because I think so often we don't share things about just things that we're interested in. Because again, we're trying to conform and trying to fit into, like I don't want to be the weirdo. And this isn't even necessarily in work environments. I think this is just generally speaking, right?
Yeah.
And I think the more insight and self-awareness and kind of exploration that we do on ourselves, we start to realize like, wow, there are a lot of other people that have that same, maybe it's a quirky interest, who knows what it is, but there are more people like that. And I don't have to tolerate being around people that are just going to lower my vibration. I think that that's where I feel like I'm at as a human in general, where I'm like reevaluating very long-term friendships, reevaluating business relationships, reevaluating familial relationships to say, is this for my best and higher good by being around this person? Because just because they've been around for 20 years, but if they're toxic, like why are we doing that? And what do we have to do? What work do we have to do internally to say, I don't belong in this environment anymore, whether it's a work environment, whether it's some kind of sporting activity that you do, whatever the thing might be, right? Like, how do we get to that place of reflection to say, this isn't worth it anymore? And then slowly pull yourself apart from it rather than causing, burning things to the ground around you, which is not always helpful.
Oh my gosh, this is so incredibly powerful, and it's super synchronistic, because in one of the conversations with the Girls Inc. program, we were talking about like, how do you know when the folks that you have in your circle are actually not for you? And there were some amazing insights from these. Like, I mean, these girls were like 13 to 18 years old, and one of them was talking about like our trauma bonds and how we stay with these folks, but they're not necessarily at our vibration, right? And so sometimes we have to like, we want, and like, I feel like I'm in the same, I've been in the same cycle that you're talking about, which is like, where do I belong? Like, who are my people? Where do I give my energy to? And part of it, I think, is that journey of like acknowledging, who are we? Like, what do we really believe? What are our values? And who really appreciates our story and our truth? And we don't have these conversations around like, you got to prune. You got to prune the people in your life sometimes, especially as you're getting to the next level and next level and next level. Not everybody's coming with you. And that's sad. And there's a lot of grief work in that. But also that's how you keep up leveling and up leveling, because you realize I need only the folks around me that honor me and reciprocate. And to me, I think that's the part of transformation that gets under talked about because it's really effing hard to let go of the 20-year relationships, of the business stuff that maybe, gosh, these business relationships have been bringing in the money, but actually, you go to bed and you're just like, oh, there's that feeling in your stomach, like this isn't in alignment. And that's really hard to face and to say, I got to move on because then it's like, well, what's next? Or you can get scarcity mentality too, even with friends. Oh my God, what if I just let all this stuff go? Who's going to be around? And there might be a gap in that too.
Mm-hmm. And I think the key is it's just hard. I think you said it really well. Like it is just hard to do the pruning. But I think the pruning is required for us to continue to evolve as people. And like you said, some people will keep elevating with us and others are just going to be that anchor that continues to weigh you down. And having that either hard conversation or putting up that boundary, right? Because I think to me, at least in my experience, it's once you put up that boundary that maybe you weren't putting up before, that typically is some kind of wall that like a physical wall, it feels like, that occurs. And I've had a number of long-term friendships in the last couple of years all kind of dissolve in different directions, and it sucks for a number of them. And at the same time, I couldn't continue with those relationships. So it's like, and then it's kind of finding that balance to be like, wow, I know that I can't continue with this person's toxicity bleeding into me, and yet at the same time, I don't want to let them go. So like there's this weird like push pull, but then we have to decide, like, what is the priority? Is the priority to stay stagnant where we are, or is the priority to be bigger, do better, whatever, however that's defined? And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get that struggle, is like, what is that tipping point where you're like, I can't do this anymore, before it turns into something dramatic and chaotic that's unnecessary.
Right. Yeah. And that's like deep excavation work and real clarity about what is it you are gaining from this relationship. For example, it could be, well, yeah, I feel really good because I feel like I get to rescue this person, and, for example. But those long held behaviors are quite a beast to unravel, to really understand like what's happening. And I do think, as part of like elevating yourself, I think when you free yourself from what's not serving you, you become more of who you are, and you become more confident of you're worthy of better, you deserve more. And I think this process that you're talking about is the process of becoming our own best friend. And I talk about that a lot. It's like, and it's really hard to be your own best friend, to be the advocate, to say this person isn't for you anymore. Or like, actually, no, you deserve better. But we have to do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's been a recent revelation of, I'm deepening the journey of becoming my own best friend as it relates to who I let in, how I let them in. Because I used to live like everybody's my friend and everybody gets the same level of energy. And woo, years ago, I realized this ain't working. This ain't working for me, And I keep deepening that and saying, what's actually happening here? Because of, my trauma, small T, big T, all the things, it's like unraveling that. But wow, what a beautiful place you end up when you drop the baggage.
I think that's the key. Yeah, you got to put that baggage away. And I think the girls that you were talking about, who were like 13 to 18, and they're over there talking about trauma bonding. Can you imagine how much more informed we would be as adults if we knew about trauma bonding when we were teenagers?
No, I'm like,
How many relationships we could have avoided?
And it's, so I have to sit here and say, wow, the social media, right? Like there's terrible things about it, but also look at the content that people get exposed to. Like I think about that too. It's like, where would I be if I got exposed to some of these concepts early on, and who would I be? Not just where would I be, but who would I be? So I have a lot of hope for the future when I think about the content that's accessible now. But coming back, right, to, you're such an advocate, right, for people sharing their story. And I want to talk about, because in our pre-call, we talked about what are we defining as success, about like and even like the why of telling our story. Like Like, is it about the 100,000 books we hope we sell? Like, is it about just getting it out and that being enough of a reason to do it? Like, even if you never sell the thing. So I'd love to talk more about like the why and to get people to think differently about defining success of writing your own book or putting your own thought leadership out there. Because I think we have such antiquated ways that we think about success. Like if it's not going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, then it's not worth doing. It's how we self-sabotage. And I'm sure you see this every day with your potential clients and your clients. So yeah, like give it to me.
Yeah, I think I love that you're like, if it's not the biggest thing since sliced bread, because what's interesting is I have a small team. We publish probably 30 books a year or so, which is still, I think, a good, healthy size and a lot of activity around here. And then we also have writing programs that people can work with us in. And when I think about when I'm having a call with somebody where someone's like, hey, you two should talk to each other and we have a conversation, the second someone tells me that they need their book to be a New York Times bestseller, I'm already half of my foot is half out the door. And I won't immediately just cast a judgment because that's not fair, but I will ask more kind of follow-up questions to say, okay, but why is that important to you? And then just keep asking, but why? But why? But why? It's, Simon Sinek, start with why. That is like the best way to do it. So if someone's listening to this and that is your goal I want to sell 100,000, I want to sell 100,000 copies when it launches. I want to be a New York Times bestseller. Just why is that important? The commonality that I have seen in working with a lot of people at this point is that it is ego. It is almost always rooted in ego when we have these big vanity metrics. Because I don't often have the conversation where someone says, I want to sell 100,000 copies because I want to impact 100,000 lives. Those don't always go side by side. The people that I talk to that are much more humble, that will say, I want to be able to get this information into the hands of as many readers as possible. And I don't even care how that happens. Whether I make money, don't make money, it doesn't matter. And the people who are coming from that lens, in my experience, tend to be the ones that see more success because their success is not directly predicated on a sale of a book. So, for example, if I look at my last book that came out, which is my 7th book, I've started an 8th book already, which
wow,
I know. I feel like I'm like a glutton for punishment. But my 7th book is called Publish Your Purpose, and it's a step-by-step guide to write, publish, and grow your big idea, right? So that's the whole idea, is to get as much of this information into the hands of as many people as possible. Do I make money from selling it? Of course I do. But if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I will just give it to them because I don't need to make money on it because it's bigger than that, because I just need authors to know that there are paths to move forward in that are not going to be predatory or take advantage of you as a first-time author, because that is absolutely in every direction of the publishing landscape and the writing landscape, is people who are just waiting for your naivete to walk through their door and just completely take all of your money and give you nothing in return. Like, it happens all day long. And so for me, my book exposes all of those things, and people aren't happy about that, but I'm like, I don't care. I'm living my truth. I don't care what the industry has to say about it. And so I will give it away all day long. So that's that. So then when I look at my goal isn't to make money, but the money always follows, right? Like, it doesn't have to be the central focus. But there are instances where, like, we're working, like, if I think about my other books that were in like a consulting capacity, the goal was to sell those at conferences, to sell them to client, in client groups. So if I was, going in and speaking to 500 people, having the books be sold as part of that. So that was very much, again, to share my story as the primary focus, to get them to be like, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. Maybe I should listen to her. But then also, here's a very easy money-making opportunity. So the two things, like the money and the impact, can absolutely go hand in hand. And I feel like we have this mindset so often that is, I can't do this unless it makes me money, or I can't make an impact if it makes me money. It's almost like we get caught in this conundrum that is not true at all. It's like this falseness that we're telling ourselves, which I think is a form of self-sabotage.
yes, 100%. And the other piece of it is there's kind of what you're saying about people who are like, yeah, like I want to use this as a money making tool or what have you. But then there's, I think, folks who they have such rich experiences, and part of it is just like, I feel like I want to, put this out there for, future generations or my children, or like, I want to get my story out there because my life was so crazy. Right. And then you have those people. And I don't know if you attract those kind of people that are just like, I just need to do this thing because like, I just feel like it has to be said. Like, and I feel like that's probably a different, I don't know, or maybe those people are also like, maybe I can make money. I don't know. But like, do you come across those, or do you wish you had more of those folks who just wanted to get their narrative out there?
We definitely have people who are in that camp. And what we do in those instances is help them find the path to getting a return on their investment, because it's not a small investment to get a book published. And so if the goal is, I just need to share the story with somebody, we still want to help them find a path back that feels good and aligned for them. Because coming up with some sleazy marketing plan like that, like it, and especially if someone doesn't have a focus of selling books to begin with, like, because there's almost like a disconnect there too, where it's like, I want to get this into as many people as in the hands of as many people as I can, but I don't want to sell them. Like, I don't want to be like selling books. I just want people to magically find the book somehow. So like it's this weird,
Right. It's
weird
like,
cycle that
yeah,
yeah, it's like we have to do both here. So if that is the goal, like if the goal is to just have someone feel seen or heard by hearing your story, there has to be a plan for how we are going to collectively get that book into the hands of those readers. However it is achieved, whether they're buying it or whether you're giving it to them, that doesn't even really matter. It's more of let's get it into their hands. And if I look at my memoir, which is called House on Fire, I wrote that book for a couple of reasons. One is that I've written 6 nonfiction books, and this was like the one book that I was like, all right, if I'm working with people writing their memoirs, I need to know what this feels like, because it's a very different experience writing a memoir versus a nonfiction book. On top of it, I also was tired of people asking me the same, like me telling my story, having someone who knew me before something happened, someone knowing me after something happened, and having like this conflict kind of happening where they're like, wait a minute, I thought you said this, but like, and make it almost seem like I'm lying. And so I'm like, I am tired of the albatross that is choking me with my own story. So I wrote my memoir. And so I did it for 2 reasons. One was that kind of like, I just want to know what the experience feels like, so that way I can really empathize and be in it with others that I'm working with. But 2 is for someone else to just see my story for the first, to like hear my story and to see their story reflected in mine, because it just was, there's not a lot of books that kind of tackle, and the through line is adoption. It's kind of like the big through line of the book. And I published it in September. And then in November, I got a call from someone who knew someone else. It was like a friend of a friend of a friend. And they were like, do you think Jenn would get on a call with me? Like, I was really impacted by this book. I'm like, of course I will. And it was like right before Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving weekend. It was sometime in November. And we were on the phone for an hour and a half on a Saturday. And this woman sobbed for 45 minutes straight, because it was the only time in her entire life that she felt like she saw her story that wasn't actually hers, right? Where she's been looking for books that tackle the topic in a way that actually she felt seen. And after that, mind you, it came out end of September. This is like, sometime middle, end of November. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm like, nothing else has to happen with this book. I have done what I came to do. Mission accomplished. And obviously it's sold many more books since. And there's been I've gotten a lot of emails from people, and just really kind of like these beautiful, beautiful kind of testaments to how they resonated with it. But it wasn't for them. It was for that one person who just needed to not feel alone. So I was able to accomplish that goal and still make money on the book. So those 2 things do not have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah. I love that, because we're getting into, right, there's like the scarcity mindset. It's got to be an or versus an and. Also, this idea of we have a shared humanity, and it is through our individual stories that we start to see it. That's why it matters. And I don't, like, we talked about this before, right? Which is not even about a book. It could be about having podcast interviews. It could be about just getting your story. It could be your blog. It could be just the person across the table from you in sharing yourself, because it matters not only because you sharing your truth is healing and revealing in and of itself, but you open the doors for other people in their journey. You make them feel seen and heard. You make them feel like it's more comfortable to be fully them. Like, it's just so many ripple effects. And I think, to your point, when we're grounded in our why of we're sharing in a way that it is for us and for others, like the abundance will come. And whether that abundance is in the number of books you sell, or the abundance is in opportunities or connections that come your way, or relationships, like that, when it comes from that truest place of your why and what you really want it to do for you and for others, like I think that's where the magic unfolds.
And I guess the why of, like, just why are we doing this?
Mm.
Why is it important? Because I don't think everyone has that innate desire to share their story to
Yeah.
impact somebody else. Like, I think a lot of people do. I definitely feel like a lot of people are like, wow, if somebody were able to hear my lived experience, that might help somebody else. So I think there's plenty of people that operate that way. But there's a whole undercurrent of people, it wouldn't even cross their mind to think that they even have some
Story.
kind of
Yeah.
lived experience or story to share, when really everyone does. And I know that there's like a lot of hate in the world toward the cisgender straight white man, but at the end of the day, they all have their own lived experiences too, and their stories matter as well. So it's not just saying that only certain stories matter. It really is that everyone's story genuinely does matter. And it's that lived experience to think through, like, why, like, what makes you or I decide I want to tell my story. Again, whatever format, does not matter. Book is irrelevant. Why are you, like, you sharing your story on a podcast, me sharing my story now on a podcast, versus maybe someone that we both collectively know who would never in a million years get on a podcast to share their story because they just don't feel like there's value there. Like, what is it in our brains that makes some of us recognize it and some of us not? I have no idea what that is, but I'm always curious.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, right? It makes me think of, like, the idea of, like, the political spectrum, right? Like, you're either talking to the people that, like, are really for you or are on the fence. And then there's the people that, like, never in a million years. And I think what you're talking about, right, is the people that even don't have the awareness that their journey matters. And I agree. I think we're living in a world in which we're still putting people in boxes and saying good and bad and judgment, right? Like, and then that diminishes because everybody has a story and it matters, and we don't know what's under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, like it's fascinating because, and I'm hoping that the listeners right now are asking themselves, do I have a story?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Because like you said, I think the majority of folks are in that camp of I don't have anything to say, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. But I think part of the reason why we have that mentality out there is because we have these vanity metrics, right? We have these, like, well, if it's not, I jumped off a cliff and I lived, if it's not that, then, like, what's the point? I think we have these extremes. And then people are like, oh, well, if it's not this big, da, 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 and it looks different, then it can't be important or it can't be worthy. And that's just, like, completely false.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you have the publishing industry that perpetuates that every day of the week. So if we look at traditional publishing, which is the Simon and Schuster, the Penguin Random Houses of the world, the way that they're picking authors is based on platform size.
Right.
They don't care. They don't care what someone's true story is. So if you already don't feel like your story is good enough, and then you realize, oh, wow, if I wanted to get a traditional publishing deal, I have to have 2 million followers on whatever platform, that is really going to diminish it even further. When the reality is that there are so many other ways to publish your book that are not that very antiquated style. Like, it is like the Titanic that is just slowly careening into the iceberg. And, the industry has a lot of problems as a result. But what I see them doing damage is that it really elevates some voices and it completely alienates the majority of voices. So many lived experiences aren't heard because that person might have some lived experience that they're not publicly talking about. But unless you have 2 million people who hear you publicly talking about that topic all the time, they don't want you. And it just seems like such a shitty way for an industry to run when the whole industry is based on stories. It drives me crazy.
Problem right there. But I love that you bring this up because so much of what I believe in is in challenging the status quo and really asking ourselves, like, why are we not doing this or why are we choosing to do that? And, like, what is the system telling us? And it goes to, like, the episode I dropped this week was create your own table. I mean, by the time this is aired, it'll probably be a few weeks back, right? But like take charge of your future and create your own table. And it doesn't have to look like these epic journeys that we're taught about what success looks like and what the path is, because there's so much innovation and there's so much advancement that the paths, there's so much democratization of technology and of access that we really have to really honor that the path we don't even know what the path can look like until we start taking that first step.
Mm-hmm. And we have to be brave enough to take that first step, to say, I don't really know how I'm going to get there, but I have this vision that I want to get somewhere that's not here. Let me start exploring and take that first baby step, because the path illuminates itself, but we just have to know that, like, all right, let me explore it without a set outcome either. Because I think that gets in our way too, is to say, all right, I'm thinking maybe I want to write a book. I'm thinking I might want to share my story on a TED stage. I think, but it's like almost the second we have that thought, the next thought is I have to concretely lock that in as a plan. And now that next step is so overwhelming because you realize that there's going to be a lot more steps and you're not really committed to it. Whereas if we can just drop all of the things, right? Like just drop I have to have this done by a certain time. I have to do it a certain way. Forget all of it and just be like, let me see what it would be for me to get on a TED stage. Let me just look without any expectation of ourselves, because we are our own worst enemy when it comes to those expectations.
I mean, are you sure you're not a transformational coach and you just haven't told me that? Because hello. What? I just want to repeat this to make sure the audience really hears it, which is we don't have to know the whole path. We just have to take the next step and the path will unfold. And we are just so wired for feeling in control and certainty. And that's what we have to unlearn, because that's actually the smallest way to live your life is thinking that or planning out all the action steps to get to where you want to be, because that's going to limit you to what comes your way. Yes, I love oh my gosh, I love all the nuggets. This has been like such a beautiful conversation. I feel like we're only scratching the surface of like, what does it really mean about telling our stories and why is it so, like, we're just kind of, I think, opening the box. So I would love for you to share a little bit more about like how people can find you if they, your books, like working together, like if they're really like scratching their head and like, I think I got a book in me and like, what do I do now? How can people get in touch?
The best way is to go to our website, which is publishyourpurpose.com, because I lead with education in everything that I do. So you can find so much information that is completely free and available on the website. If you want to check out the book, it's called Publish Your Purpose. It's wherever you want to buy a book, you'll be able to find it. But if, money is a barrier, just send me an email. My email is clearly on the website. You can go to hello@publishyourpurpose.com. I'm happy to just, send a copy, because I never want that to be kind of a barrier. But if you're like, hey, I think there's something here, there's a way to schedule time on the website. So it's all kind of there and available, depending if you're kind of still I'm stuck in my mindset and don't really know how to fix it. There's resources. I know I want to write, I just don't know how to do it. There's resources. And I know I want to publish, but I don't know how to do it. There's resources for that. So it's very cleanly laid out on the website too. So it shouldn't be too overwhelming.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on here. I'm excited for we covered some really deep topics, in between the book cover of sharing your story. So this was amazing. And yeah, I look forward to, I don't know, even hopefully working with you someday on my own piece of work. So
speaking of someone with a story to tell.
I'm putting that in the universe. I feel like sometimes we have to claim it more, right? For ourselves. Say it out loud. So I'm saying it out loud. I want to do it. I don't know what or where or when, but it's definitely in my ether, in my heart. So yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for coming to the lab. I hope that something has unlocked for you, and look forward to seeing you next time. So ciao for now.
Thank you.